Good morning, people. Quick disclaimer, this is not legal advice. I'm making this video for educational purposes and for training purposes. Please, if you're having a legal issue, consult an attorney that's admitted in the jurisdiction where you're dealing with that issue. Do your research. Try to find an attorney that is experienced and competent. This video, I'm going to be talking about legal issues and different things, decisions from courts, and my experiences within the court system. But please, don't take this as written law. I could be mistaken. I haven't had my coffee this morning. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I run a law firm, but I'm pulling my hair out most of the time, so I'm just trying to squeeze out some content. Try not to take this as seriously, other than, education, training, not legal advice. I don't know how else to hammer that in, so I'm going to go for it now. So today I wanted to talk about the Certificate of Conformity. So what a Certificate of Conformity is basically it's a document that is required in New York. Put a little asterisk on that, talk to your attorney, when you're trying to submit to the courts a notarized document that was notarized outside of the state of New York. So basically, what this document is telling the courts is that the notarization process for the document you're submitting was done appropriately, according to either the laws of New York or that jurisdiction. As a state would have to honor another state notary license. So basically, it's a simple statement that whoever is signing it is, or whoever's filling this out is whoever's notarizing your document. So it can be an attorney that's licensed as a notary. Those are not, you can be an attorney and not be a notary. Or just a notary public that's licensed. So you don't have to be an attorney to fill this out. Again, not legal advice. Consult your own professional. But this simple statement, you can read it yourself, basically explains this is what I use. And again, do your own research. If you're an attorney, do your own research. Consult colleagues. If you're a layman or a non-attorney, consult an attorney, consult a professional. But that's what I use. So the first run-in I had with the Certificate of Conformity was I was actually following an order to show cause in Queens County. I believe it was Judge Taylor. And Judge Taylor, when we were in, this is back before COVID, we were in chambers, all counsel present. She's reviewing the order to show cause. The opposing counsel had their own order to show cause. She basically threw out all of our orders to show cause, didn't refuse to sign them. And the reason for mine not being signed was because I had an affidavit in support that was notarized out of state, and I didn't have a Certificate of Conformity. So she refused to consider that, and that basically was what I needed to support my order to show cause. So we all had to go back to the drawing board and refile our papers. That's just one instance. Another instance that I've dealt with this as an attorney was I I represented a client that was dealing with a judgment. It was businesses. This was so there's a lending industry where it's kind of like payday lending for the individual, but it's for businesses. So it's, they'll buy your revenue for premium, or you're paying the premium with businesses, and they'll give you the cash. So you're making $100,000 a month. They're saying, I'll buy that $100,000 of revenue, and I'll just give you $60,000 for it right now. And then you have to pay either daily or monthly or whatever it is to give them their money back. And if you don't pay, they usually have you sign what's called a confession of judgment ahead of time, so that if you don't pay, it triggers them filing that confession of judgment and automatically getting a judgment against you. Now, when this was brought to my clients were from out of state in this instance, and they actually changed the law before these judgments were filed against my client, where you're not allowed to do this confession of judgment process with out of state people. It has to be in New York State. Now, again, not legal advice. Consult a professional if you're dealing with this type of issue. But in this situation, the law did not go into effect yet, so these people were able to rush in their confession of judgment, like literally days, weeks before the law went into effect, and they were able to secure judgments, freeze accounts, do all that type of stuff. So my client came to me trying to work out a deal with them, and the cases were in two very different counties and areas, and I'll talk about the experience in both of those. The first one was in Niagara County, and this is the case. And here I argued that when they were doing this confession of judgment process, they submitted a notarized document that wasn't, or that didn't have a certificate of conformity, and so the court shouldn't have considered it as evidence, and should have rejected that document and had them refile that. There was a whole slew of other arguments, but I'm only talking about certificate of conformity here, so we'll keep it to that. And there, on this issue of a certificate of conformity, I actually lost on that motion, and the judge didn't agree with my arguments. Now, the situation here was that they actually had the full jurat on their notary, the notary jurat. Look that up, do your research, speak to a professional. But that was the saving grace. So they're saying, if the notary stamp's there, it has the county, it has the license number and all that, the full name of the person that's notarizing it, and it has the full jurat, then there's no way that you could really attack that notarization wasn't valid, and that's good cause. So on that issue, it didn't work. However, I still thought there's some merit to that, so I was definitely going to pursue an appeal, but in the end, sometimes it takes a little bit of litigation and showing that you're willing to pursue a legal issue to get people to the bargaining table, and you're able to work out a good deal. Again, not legal advice, just educational training purposes. So either way, presenting that issue and arguing that issue ended up being good for my client. They got out of that judgment. There's two other cases, and this is completely different counties. Kings County, where I made the same argument, among other arguments, that there was no certificate of conformity, and therefore the court shouldn't have used that as evidence, and so the judgment should be vacated. And here, in both of those cases, one of them, the order's already out, and the judgment is vacated, and the other one, I just got word that the order is in the pipeline, and that one I expect also to be vacated. But there, the situation was different as well. Their notarization not only didn't have the certificate of conformity, it didn't have a full drop. It just had sworn to and then like a date thing. So that can actually, I don't know, do your research. I've heard that type of, like a notary even in New York that just says sworn to and has a date, and the notary stamp, the signature is or before me sworn to, is not enough. And I've heard of even notarizations in New York being rejected, but I'm not talking about that. So to keep it on topic, certificate of conformity, out of state, I think it's something that you should have in your document pool. You should have a copy of this. If you're regularly or in the business of law, you're a professional, a legal professional. And those cases are, or the situations that I brought up are clear examples of how, depending on the jurisdiction, the judge, things can vary very wildly. Legislators try to address that. There's panels and committees and everything that, but the law is very complex. So that's why it's very important that you have an attorney that you trust. So please consult a legal professional. Pay consultation fees. It's worth it. Definitely worth it. This is my video on the certificate of conformity. Again, training and educational purposes only. Please don't rely on this for legal advice. If you're dealing with a situation, consult a competent attorney, please. All right, have a good one. Trust no one.